It feels like today you're just drowning in online certificates, but you're still completely starving for actual experience.
Oh, absolutely. We see it constantly in the modern knowledge economy.
Right. Like you spend your weekends taking yet another boot camp, you earn, another shiny badge for your LinkedIn profile.
You read all the latest industry white papers.
Yeah. And yet when you log in on Monday morning, none of it actually translates. It just feels like the exact same reactive, chaotic grind.
And that creeping imposter syndrome hasn't faded one bit.
Not even a little. I mean, it really feels like we have fundamentally misunderstood what professional upskilling actually is.
Well, the problem is we treat learning as a discrete event. It's a box to be checked, a curriculum you just finish.
Right.
But the reality of high-level knowledge work, especially in data and tech, is that the landscape shifts way too quickly for any static curriculum to remain relevant.
Yeah. Which brings us to the stack of sources sitting on the table for today's deep dive.
Yes, these are fascinating.
So we got our hands on a massive 69-document master file of intern project guides and performance logs, alongside a beta document for a framework called iDartagle.
Which is such an interesting concept.
It really is. So our mission today is to decode exactly what iDartagle is and how it maps to something the creators call the data spectrum.
And I want to emphasize, this isn't just theoretical.
No, not at all. These documents outline a way to completely transform the overwhelming grind of your career into this highly structured, gamified adventure.
Where you literally level up through your daily lived experience.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. What is iDartagle?
Well, the central thesis of the iDartagle system is that we need to stop teaching isolated tools and start developing data masters through continuous real-world action.
I love that term, data masters.
Right. It heavily borrows the psychological hooks and mechanics of massive open-world role-playing games. Think Dungeons and Dragons or Skyrim.
Yeah, but overlaid onto your professional life. So if we strip away the corporate buzzwords, let's look at the actual mechanics detailed in the guide.
The system operates on three foundational pillars. You have quests, campaigns, and XP.
Okay, so let's break those down. In a traditional corporate training module, you sit through a video, you take a multiple choice test.
Yeah, but in iDartagle, there are no tests. There are only quests.
Which is a tangible block of applied practice, right?
Exactly. Migrating a legacy database, refactoring a messy Python script.
Or even presenting a quarterly review to a really hostile stakeholder group.
Oh, definitely. Those are all quests.
And a quest is only valuable because of how it strings together with other actions to form a campaign.
Right, because you might have a 6-month objective to, say, reduce customer churn.
Okay.
That is your campaign. It provides the actual narrative arc for your daily work.
So suddenly, fixing a broken data pipeline isn't just an annoying ticket in your Jira queue.
No, it becomes a critical side quest that you have to complete to advance the overarching campaign.
Wow, that really shifts your perspective, doesn't it? From just enduring isolated frustrations to building a cohesive professional narrative.
It does. And that narrative progress is tracked through experience points, or XP.
And this is where the framework gets really fascinating for me, because it completely abandons that standard metric of time spent at a desk.
Oh, completely. Logging 8 hours in an office chair does not earn you 8 hours of XP.
Which is how most jobs work.
Yeah.
But iDartagle calculates growth entirely based on focus.
Right. The base metric is simple. 1 minute of focused work equals 1 XP.
But there's a multiplier, right?
Yes, the multiplier is where the real self-calibration happens. The system introduces the concept of a flow score.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So if you block out 2 hours for a deep work session, the maximum potential yield is 120 XP.
Because it's 120 minutes.
Exactly. However, if you leave your email notifications on, constantly check your phone, let your mind wander.
Basically what I do every afternoon.
Right. Then you are operating with a diminished flow score. You might assess yourself at 50% capacity, meaning you only extract 60 XP from those 2 hours.
Man, the documents go incredibly deep into the biology of why we lose that focus too. They introduced this tool called the flow compass.
Yes, I found that part brilliant.
It frames distraction not as a moral failure or a lack of discipline, but as an acute biological response to your environment.
Right. When you lose focus, you are usually bouncing into either the red zone or the blue zone.
Okay, let's look at the red zone first.
So the red zone occurs when the challenge of the quest drastically exceeds your current skill level. You are just overwhelmed.
And the biology here is what really caught my attention. The guide notes that when you hit the red zone, your brain perceives the complex task as a literal threat.
Yes, your amygdala fires.
Cortisol just floods your system and your executive function plummets.
You are physically paralyzed by the complexity of, say, the data architecture you're trying to build.
You aren't procrastinating because you're lazy. You're procrastinating because your brain is trying to escape a stressor.
Exactly. And the prescribed intervention for the red zone is so simple, but brilliant.
The salami slicing.
Salami slicing. You have to bridge the skill gap to turn off that cortisol response.
So you stop trying to build the entire architecture all at once.
Right. You slice the task down to a ridiculously small, non-threatening 5-minute action.
You just write one line of code.
Or you read one single page of the API documentation.
And by shrinking the scope, you trick your nervous system into feeling safe again, allowing you to re-enter a state of flow.
Which brings us to the inverse problem, the blue zone.
Right, the realm of the underwhelmed.
This is when the quest is too easy. Your skills vastly outmatch the challenge, and you are basically running on autopilot.
Like updating a spreadsheet you've updated 100 times before.
Exactly. In the blue zone, you are experiencing dopamine starvation.
Wow, dopamine starvation.
Your brain requires a certain level of friction to stay engaged. When a task provides zero friction, your brain actively seeks out artificial novelty.
Which is why you suddenly find yourself mindlessly scrolling through social media.
Precisely. So to escape the blue zone, you have to manufacture stakes.
How do you do that?
Well, you might set a 15-minute countdown timer for a task that usually takes 20, forcing what the guide calls a speed sprint.
Oh, I like that.
Or you impose a creative constraint. Challenge yourself to automate that spreadsheet update instead of doing it manually.
So the goal is to constantly navigate back to the green path, perfectly balanced between the anxiety of the red zone and the apathy of the blue zone.
That's the ideal state, yes.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, though.
Yeah.
Because looking at this from the perspective of an employee,
Sure.
the idea of tracking my minute-by-minute focus and grading my psychological state,
Yeah.
it sounds dangerously close to corporate surveillance.
It does sound like that at first glance.
Right. Like, if management is using my flow score to decide my annual bonus, this entire framework becomes a micromanagement nightmare.
Well, the creators of the beta document actually anticipated that exact reaction.
Oh, they did?
Yes, the documentation is explicitly clear on this. iDartagle is a private, personal ledger. It is completely decoupled from corporate key performance indicators. It functions as an internal compass, not an external whip.
Okay, that makes all the difference. It isn't a competitive leaderboard on the wall?
Not at all. It is a tool for self-awareness. The philosophy here is that learning is an accumulation of lived experience.
Right.
So assessing yourself a low flow score isn't a punishment. It is a diagnostic tool for you to realize, hey, I'm biologically incapable of writing complex algorithms at 3 p.m. on a Friday.
I definitely am.
Right. And then you use that data to restructure your own working rhythms.
Okay, so now that we understand how the mechanics measure our focus, we need to look at what we are actually focusing on. We need to look at the game board itself.
The arena where this all happens.
Exactly. The sources categorize all data work into a foundational map consisting of 3 realms: the physical, the logical, and the emotional.
And every single piece of information, regardless of your industry, must travel through these 3 realms to actually be useful.
A quick way to visualize this, and I found this really helpful, is to think of a high-end restaurant.
It's a great analogy.
So the physical realm is the infrastructure. It's the walk-in freezers, the raw ingredients, the industrial ovens, the plumbing. It is tangible and foundational.
Right. If the power goes out, the restaurant basically ceases to exist.
Exactly. Following that logic, the logical realm is the chef's process.
It's the application of heat, the technique, the recipe applied to those raw ingredients.
It's where raw items are filtered, combined, and transformed into a composed dish.
And then the emotional realm is the dining room.
The lighting, the plating, the ambiance,
Yeah.
the diner's actual subjective experience of consuming the meal.
Because the food could be technically perfect in the logical realm of the kitchen.
But if it is served in a dark, freezing dining room, the meal is a complete failure.
Exactly. Now, encompassing all 3 of these realms is a concept the framework calls the domain.
The domain.
The domain is the fundamental why. It is the underlying context of the data.
So sticking with the analogy, the domain is the concept of the restaurant itself. Are we running a fast casual burger joint or a 3 Michelin star tasting menu?
Right. The domain dictates the purpose of the kitchen and the dining room.
In the real world, the domain is your industry.
Exactly. Building a predictive model, which is a logical realm task, is a fundamentally different experience if your domain is algorithmic high-frequency trading versus, say, pediatric oncology research.
The context completely changes the weight of the data.
It does. And zooming in on those three realms reveals the true core of the iDartagle system, the data spectrum.
This is cool. This is a 7-color gradient that maps out every conceivable task a data practitioner can undertake.
It provides a visual language for the entire life cycle of information.
Now, the documentation walks through these colors sequentially, but instead of just reading off definitions, let's actually look at the mechanism in action.
I like that. Let's trace a single piece of data.
Say, a customer swiping a credit card. Let's trace it as it travels all the way from the physical realm up to the emotional realm.
Okay, so that swipe begins in the deep physical, which the spectrum codes as red.
Red is the hardware.
Yes, the cables, the literal copper wires, the heat dissipation in the server farm that receives the initial electrical ping of the transaction.
Okay, so from the red hardware, the signal hits orange, the physical structure.
This is your operating system, the file directories, the foundational architecture that catches the data and gives it a living condition.
Orange ensures the data doesn't just vanish into the ether.
Right, but now the data needs to move, so it enters yellow, which is movement.
Yellow is like the circulatory system.
Exactly. This is the Kafka stream, the ETL pipeline, the API integration that pulls the swipe data from the orange storage and pumps it into a centralized data warehouse.
Where it can actually be used. And this brings us out of the physical realm and into the logical realm, specifically green.
Green is the cognitive center, the brain.
Right, so our credit card swipe is now fed into, let's say, a random forest anomaly detection model.
And the green algorithms analyze the timestamp, the location, the purchase amount, and they compare it against years of historical data to spot patterns.
Okay, so let's say the green model flags the transaction as suspicious.
But an algorithm sitting quietly on a server helps no one. The insight must be perceived.
So it crosses into the emotional realm, hitting blue. Perception.
Blue is the visual system. It's the Tableau or Power BI dashboard that takes that abstract mathematical flag from the green model and renders it as a flashing red dot on a map of global transactions.
It makes the invisible visible.
Precisely. But once that flashing dot is visible, a human has to look at it.
Which brings us to indigo, interpretation.
Indigo represents the prefrontal cortex, the application of human judgment.
Right, so a fraud analyst looks at the blue dashboard, applies their knowledge of the domain, and realizes, hey, this card was physically swiped at a cafe in London, but the user's mobile app is currently pinging a cell tower in Tokyo.
This is fraud.
Indigo bridges the gap between a visual pattern and a business reality.
And then the journey ends in violet. Deep emotional.
Violet is the limbic system, right? The heart.
It is storytelling, persuasion, and real-world impact.
So in our example, violet is the automated, highly empathetic push notification sent to the customer's phone, reassuring them that their account is frozen and their money is safe.
It is the emotional relief the customer feels.
So the data physically moved from an electrical pulse in a red server rack all the way to a human emotion in violet.
That's the data spectrum.
Now, here is where I really have to push back, though.
Oh, okay.
If I am a listener trying to use this system to navigate my career, this 7-color spectrum looks like a recipe for massive information overload.
How so?
Well, the industry already demands too much. Am I seriously expected to be a hardware engineer, a database architect, a statistical modeler, and a master storyteller all at the same time?
Joycey, no, you are absolutely not expected to master the entire spectrum.
Okay, thank God.
The framework is actually designed to prevent exactly that kind of full-stack burnout.
So what are you supposed to do?
Instead, iDartagle asks you to map your daily activities against these colors to identify your unique footprint.
Where your energy naturally flows.
Exactly. And that footprint forms your professional identity.
Which is just like choosing a character class in a role-playing game.
The guide literally outlines classes based on your color focus.
I love this part. So, if you spend your days building pipelines in yellow, structuring databases in orange, and occasionally racking servers in red,
then your class is the druid. You are the protector of the physical data flow.
But if you operate almost entirely in the emotional realm, designing blue dashboards and using indigo interpretation to craft violet presentations for the executive board,
then your class is the bard.
And there are others too, right?
Oh, yeah. You could be a ranger bridging the logical green and emotional blue, or a sorcerer operating at the absolute highest levels of violet persuasion.
The terminology sounds really playful, but the underlying philosophy in these intern guides is incredibly profound.
It really is. They state, and I quote, "You are not just completing a task, you are becoming the practitioner you practice."
Wow. In the traditional corporate hierarchy, we basically allow our job titles to dictate our identity.
Right. You might have the official title of senior data scientist, which implies a deep focus on green analytical modeling.
But if your actual daily ledger reveals that you spend 90% of your XP fighting with yellow data pipelines just to get the data clean enough to use,
Then you are not functioning as a data scientist. Functionally, you are playing a druid.
so the game strips away the vanity of your title and forces you to be brutally honest about who you are actually becoming through your daily actions.
Exactly. And once you accept your true class, the path to leveling up becomes completely clear.
Because of the golden rule?
Yes, the golden rule of iDartagle, it says, if your strongest color is your class, your weakest color is your next quest.
Let's look at how that actually works in practice. Suppose I am a bard.
Okay, you're a bard.
I am highly skilled at blue visualization and indigo interpretation. I build beautiful dashboards. But my weakness is that I have absolutely no idea how the data actually reaches my dashboard.
You don't understand the underlying architecture.
Right. Under the old paradigm, I'd probably just take another course on advanced dashboard design, reinforcing my existing strengths while completely ignoring my blind spots.
But following the golden rule, your next quest shouldn't be learning a new blue visualization tool.
My next quest must be dipping into yellow.
Exactly. You might spend a week shadowing the data engineering team, earning XP by helping them debug an ETL pipeline.
So I don't need to become a master druid.
No, not at all. You just need to stretch into the color immediately bordering your comfort zone.
And by understanding the yellow pipelines, I suddenly understand why my blue dashboards are suffering from latency issues.
The cross-training makes you an exponentially more effective bard. It provides a highly personalized, stress-free roadmap for professional development.
You stop panicking about the thousands of things you don't know, and you simply look at your personal spectrum to find the next logical step.
It's brilliant.
I really want you, listening right now, to apply this to your own life. Regardless of your industry, you can look at the tasks on your calendar for tomorrow, map them to the physical, logical, and emotional realms, and instantly see what class you are naturally playing.
And it validates your specific asymmetrical contributions to your team.
Yeah, you aren't failing at your job because you don't know statistical modeling. You just happen to be a bard. And your team needs a bard to communicate the value of the models the Rangers are building.
It replaces vague career anxiety with actionable self-knowledge. iDartagle takes the endless, soul-crushing chore of staying relevant and turns it into a targeted campaign of lived experience.
You stop agonizing over the title on your resume and start focusing on accumulating XP in the colors that actually matter.
Which brings us to the final, somewhat existential thought presented in these documents.
Right. The iDartagle guide explicitly states there is, quote, no final level, only depth.
It implies an endless game.
But we must contextualize this within the current technological reality. The game board is fundamentally shifting beneath our feet.
Oh, absolutely. We are living through the explosive evolution of artificial intelligence.
And so we have to ask, what happens to this ecosystem when AI begins automatically completing the quests in the lower and middle colors?
Because we are already seeing large language models write their own yellow data pipelines and execute complex green statistical analysis in seconds.
Exactly. If the machine layer completely subsumes the physical and logical realms, if AI handles all the red, orange, yellow, and green heavy lifting, what happens to the human players?
Do the druids and the rangers become obsolete?
Will the data masters of tomorrow be forced to operate exclusively in the violet and indigo emotional realms?
It's a huge question. If our only remaining value is the uniquely human ability to apply contextual judgment and empathetic storytelling, does the entire workforce effectively become a guild of bards?
Or does the spectrum simply compress? Perhaps the baseline expectation for a human worker shifts entirely, and new colors emerge beyond violet to represent skills we haven't even conceptualized yet.
It really is the defining question for the future of our relationship with information.
If the machines do the reasoning, our final frontier is the meaning. Keep that in mind as you map your own colors this week. Thank you for sitting at the table with us for this deep dive into the data spectrum. Go earn some focused XP today, stay on the green path, and we will see you next time.